Okay, abusia be ma kwaba sonko so adeba POG Media so abusia yembonra yensemu no finally John Dramani Mahama edine cabinet ministers no aba abontia abusia enye asem ketwa intino wa electing the cabinet ministers oyi no cabinet no omoye 19 o kan say no Embro 19 ampara no wedi ne boshe so ne cabinet ministers ene ode list ne betu dwa no omoye 19 pepepe busia moma yembo edina etese omo epiem wo ne cabinet ministers ni mu no Dr. Kisel Ato Forsen finance minister ono epiem ewo cabinet ministers ni mu Muntaka enso epiem ewo hobi Dominic Anyini ononso epimo ewo ho Haruna Idrusu ononso edin epimo the likes of Okujeto Ablakwamo Sami George mo ene Kwame Gavin Munira EPP mo abusuya enye sa edin we nko a mom yenko na yenkonkotie nsema ekos na ansa na bekono ensem kan bi afahye your comment section mu like na share ma afofron so ensa into me enka bi POG Media so medamase
Ghana tonight. Now, coming up next, President John Dramani Mahama unveils members of his cabinet, which he had earlier said would be the youngest in the Fourth Republic on the average in terms of the age representation. Average age representation. We'll show you which persons make up the cabinet and what the expectations are for this cabinet of President John Dramani Mahama. But earlier today, the Minister of State in charge of Government Communications, spokesperson for the President, Phyllis Akuffo, the press briefing officially unveiled the cabinet of President John Dramani Mahama, comprising 19 ministers of state, making it a 21-member cabinet. And there's a reason why we say it's a 21-member cabinet as against the earlier stand has always been the case as referred to as a 19-member cabinet. And we'll break it down for you. That announcement was made by the minister earlier today when he engaged the press. Take a look.
Cabinet is an important decision-making body of government, perhaps the most important. And every president is required by the Constitution to compose a cabinet. And that cabinet, once composed, must begin regular meetings to fashion out policy and determine the direction of governance. So, as a first requirement, President Mahama has composed his cabinet. And as you may be aware, the constitutional requirement is that cabinet must be made up of 19 ministers. And so the first point of business is to put together this body of 19 ministers, chaired by the president himself. And I would proceed to announce the names of the 19 ministers who form the cabinet. First on the list is the Minister for Finance, the Minister for the Interior, Minister for Health, Minister for Defense, the Attorney General and Minister for Justice, the Minister for Energy and Green Transition, the Minister for Education, the Minister for Trade, Agribusiness and Industry, Minister for Lands and Natural Resources, Minister for Foreign Affairs, Minister for Food and Agriculture, Minister for Communication, Digital Technology and Innovations, the Minister for Roads and Highways, Minister for Environment, Science and Technology, Minister for Works, Housing and Water Resources, Minister for Local Government, Chieftaincy and Religious Affairs, Minister for Gender, Children and Social Protection, Minister for Transport, Minister for Labor, Jobs and Employment. So these are the 19 ministers who form cabinet together with the president. Now, apart from these 19 ministers, other ministers are made to attend. And so you find that the description for that would be in attendance. So the following ministers were in attendance at cabinet today. So the Minister of Sports and Recreation, the Minister of Youth Development and Empowerment, the Minister for Fisheries and Aquaculture, Minister for Tourism, Culture and Creative Arts, Minister of State in charge of Special Initiatives, and my good self, the Minister for State responsible for Government Communications, the Minister of State for Climate Change and Sustainability, and Minister of State Public Sector Reforms. So this essentially is the composition of those who attended Cabinet today, in addition to the Cabinet ministers. Now, today's session primarily was to introduce Cabinet and ensure that people have a handle on what exactly the expectation is of them in Cabinet. The ground rules were set out, and important briefings on matters relating to governance took place.
Felix Akuffo is Minister of State in charge of Government Communication. You hear him talk about the core, the cabinet of 19 ministers, and rightly so, but that is not just a number, and he heard me talk about the 21 that we say we're going to break down, because Article 76 of the 1992 Constitution, which details exactly which persons make up the cabinet, and then also the upper limit and then the lower limit of the number of ministers that a president can appoint, defines what we're going to be breaking down. The president and the vice president can chair the cabinet meetings as and when, but the president is the chair, the vice president is also present. If the president is not available, the vice president chairs cabinet. And so if you add these two persons to the 19 ministers, that upper limit of 19, then you have 21. But this is what Article 76 of the 1992 Constitution spells out or stipulates when it comes to the cabinet. There shall be a cabinet consisting of the president, the vice president, not less than 10, and not more than 19 ministers of state. We've seen over time that presidents in the not too distant past always go with the upper limit of the 19 ministers who make up the cabinet, ministers of state. But there's that bracket of between 10 and 19, not less than 10 and not more than 19 ministers. And we've seen the 19 ministers, although President John Mahama is going with 60 ministers, it's still the 19 ministers who make up the cabinet. Goes on that the cabinet shall assist the president, this is their duty, in determining the general policy of government. There shall also be that secretary who shall be appointed by the president. You had Felix Akuffo also detailed that. So when it comes to, for instance, policies like the 24-hour economy, which is the flagship, one of the flagship programs of this administration, this cabinet is charged with that responsibility of fleshing out the details of it, and then also the implementation plan for it. And Gusitano has that responsibility in the coming days. And this cabinet, we understand today, that was one of the issues, the 24-hour economy, the rollout plan was a topical issue during the cabinet meeting earlier today. Also, these are the cabinet ministers we're talking about. Felix Akuffo ran through the names, but these are the identities of the persons in pictorial form. Dr. Kesela Tofosin, Finance Minister, Mohamed Muntaka Mubarak, Interior Minister, Kwabena Kanto, the Health Minister, Dr. Edward Omanebuama, Minister for Defense, Dr. Dominic Akuritinga Ayine, Attorney General, Minister of Justice, John Abdullahi Jinapo, Energy and Green Transition Minister, Haruna Idrisu, Education Minister, Elizabeth Ofosojari, Minister for Trade, Agribusiness and Industry, Emmanuel Amakofiboa, Minister for Lands and Natural Resources, Samuel Kujato Ablakwa, Foreign Affairs Minister, Eric Opoku, Minister for Food and Agriculture, Samuel Nate George, Minister for Communication, Digital Technology and Innovations, Kwame Governs Agboja, Minister of Roads and Highways, Ibrahim Mutala Mohammed, Minister for Environment, Science and Technology, J. Kenneth Gilbert, Minister for Works, Housing and Water Resources, Ahmed Ibrahim, Minister for Local Government, Chieftaincy and Religious Affairs, Agnes Namamolate, Dr. Agnes Namamolate, Minister for Gender, Children and Social Protection, Joseph Bukari Nikbe as Transport Minister, and also Dr. Abdul Rashid Pelpo, Minister, Labor, Jobs and Employment. And his work indeed has already started when it comes to engaging labor and also reaching the minimum wage, which was earlier announced today, and the continuous engagement with CLOGSAG, especially with the strike that they have declared, which began today, by the way, against the appointment of the Registrar of the Deaths and Deaths Registry. It says by tomorrow, he is confident that CLOGSAG will call off this strike. We'll see how things play out on that. But when it comes to the ages of these persons, and there's a reason why we're looking at that, because the president, when he was candidate, John Dramani Mahama, in March 2024, made a promise to the Ghanaian people and essentially the youth of the NDC when he was also inaugurating the youth center for the NDC, that if elected, he's going to have the youngest cabinet on the average, in terms of average age, youngest cabinet in the Fourth Republic. Let's recall exactly what he said at that event, and we'll show you something shortly. Take a look.
One of the promises.
So that was the promise that he made. So here's what we did. And our research team here with Weiss Safo looked through the ages of these persons that we're talking about here, these cabinet ministers. And this is publicly available data. You can find a number of them. In fact, 17 out of the 19 are members of parliament. So if you go on the website of parliament, you'll get their date of birth, and then you can calculate their ages very easily. So it's publicly available document or information that you can find as well as our viewers. So stay with us. 48 years, that's the average age of the cabinet ministers. These are excluding non-members of parliament. The two non-members of parliament are J. Kenneth Gilbert, who is not a member of parliament, the Minister for Works, Housing and Water Resources, and then also Dr. Edward Omanibuama, who is the Defense Minister. He is also not a member of parliament. Apart from these two, the rest of the cabinet ministers, 17 of them, are members of parliament. So here's what we did. We did the average on the 17 out of 19, and the average age of the 17, excluding these non-MPs, that's 48 years. Now, if you do a breakdown of the gender representation, 89% of the cabinet members are male. 17 out of the 19. There are 2 females out of the 19 on the cabinet. And then the female representation on the cabinet, 2 out of the 19. That's 11%. Then quite apart from that, we also see these 2 persons whose ages are also not represented in there. And we used the exclusion formula in doing the statistical representation to understand the average age of these cabinet ministers. That's 48. So on the average, yes, John Mahama is actually on track to have fulfilled that promise made to the young people in March last year. But beyond this, what are the expectations of this cabinet that has been announced today? Professor Enoch Enchi is a governance and leadership expert. He's joining us on Zoom right now. Professor Enchi, appreciate your time. Good evening. Thank you for joining us here on Ghana Tonight.
Good evening, Alfred, and greetings to all your viewers and listeners everywhere in the world.
It's good to have you. Now, first off, the details as we have it now are spelled out by Felix Kwacho today. The first meeting, a lot of it was focused on the 24-hour economy and other matters as well. Now, considering the mandate given to John Dramani Mahama, what are your expectations of this cabinet that was announced today?
My expectations are the same as the expectation of Ghanaians. And if you look at the priorities, why they were selected, immediate priorities are tackling inflation. The good news is that since NDC came to power, just after a month of being into power, inflation has reduced from 25% to 23.8%. So there are positive signs that inflation is working in our favor now. We also have to reduce unemployment, which is a big issue in the country because most of the youth have nothing to do practically. and then addressing security issues. So these are the three main priorities that the government have to do. Now, what are the concerns? The economy is in a bad shape, and there's a bagel call for action, both rural, urban, rich, poor, left, right, and everywhere in between. So we have to make our communities the best we can. And that is where youthful exuberance comes in. So the president is looking for a couple of things. People who are loyal to him, and then people who are the future of NDC and Ghana. And I'm glad that President Mel started this with the youth, and then President Mahama is continuing with the youth. So the average age of 48 is great. But you started with a point that I want to clarify on Article 76. It says that the cabinet, there shall be a cabinet which shall consist of the president, comma. So the president is not part. The vice president, comma, and not less than 10 and not more than 19 ministers of state. So if you look at it critically, the president and the vice president are not part of the minimum of 10 and then the maximum of 19. And that is why we have the 19. That means he's working within the confines of the Constitution.
Absolutely. I think that was not in contention. I qualified the 21 as the sitting members at a cabinet meeting. Normally, the communication is a 19-member cabinet meeting. And that clarification had to be put out very clearly. And I was quite consistent in showing the upper limit of the ministers that the president is allowed to appoint to be part of the cabinet, and then the lower limit of between 10 and 19. I guess that clarity was there.
Trying to open the right keys to the right door, so
right.
We're cool with that.
Absolutely.
Now, the parameters, quickly, they have to assist the president in governing the nation within 4 years. And in doing that, the president was looking for loyalty because he had created a sense of urgency for unemployment, 24-hour economy, and then to create a buy-in into his vision. Then we needed those who will tackle pressing national challenges and fulfilling key campaign promises. And I think that these young guys are in tune with what the president is looking for. So we need a diverse mix of decision makers with a wide variety of education and background. And we are getting that from this present cabinet. Then we need to build them as new youthful face for the future. So if the president is having faith in the youth, they have to pay him back with efficiency and effectiveness. And that is what Ghanaians are expecting. Now, if you look at the
apologies. Yes. I lost you briefly. Please.
Yes, I had a call from you, so you were calling.
Apologies.
If you look at demographics of the world, Africa is the only continent out of our 1.4 billion population. We have 65% of our population below the age of 35. So we are the most youthful population in the world. But if you look at the trend, we were having the most oldest presidents on the world. So now that the older folks have begun to, trust leadership into the youth, I think it's a good thing. But I'm also going to advise them that if they don't do well, then they are going to block the chances of the youth. So the onus rests on them to prove that they are doing well, because research has shown that every new generation is smarter than the older generation. So most people might think that this younger generation are lazy and a whole lot of things. But when we come to technology and AI, anytime our phones are problem, don't we give it to our kids to fix it for us? Because this is their world, and we need to begin to use their expertise. So I have 13 advice for the incoming cabinet ministers. First, they have to speak with one voice, which is very important in governance. 2, they have to do community problem analysis. I'm talking about community because most of our problems are in our communities. And then they have to assess each community data to see what they have and what they are not doing. What the advanced world is doing now is that if Akroma Dam, for instance, is really good in tomatoes, then they will have a tomato fest where the whole country will go to Akroma Dam for tomato fest, and then we will showcase the kind of tomatoes and what they do. So let's begin to identify what each community do best and then celebrate that, which is very important. Then we have to appreciate the inquiry and then translate the president's vision into action. All that the vision the president have had will come to naught if we don't see the action being taken and then the physical product in our hands. So they have to translate every vision of the president, 24-hour economy, jobs, a lot of things, so that the action will be seen on the ground. And then they have to manage conflict immediately. That is very important. Any conflict going on, we have pockets of conflicts in the northern region, some part, what is going on, those need to be swiftly and nimbly fixed. Then we have to build societal capital across different cultures. We have different cultures in our society with different capitals. A lot of people have resources and they are not getting anything out of it. We need to see practical, physical, if it is roads from these mining situations, we have to find them. And then build coalitions, which is very important. Make sure that we have effective community teams in fixing Galamsey, because the community level can do that. How do we do that? We have to recruit and sustain volunteers. So how do we recruit and sustain volunteers? We are creating employment, and we're also making sure that these volunteers are also fixing local problems.
Right.
And then get them out of their meeting. The last one is that they should get the most out of the meeting with the president. Is that we go to meetings to plan for another meeting. That's not what we're looking for. We have to go to meetings, get concrete results, practical results that can fix problems in this country that we all love.
And you've said it all. In fact, gone ahead of me to say everything that I wanted to ask in there. Appreciate you for this. And then the specific expectations of the meetings as well. And then when you come to the checklist of every meeting is what you have gone ahead of me to outline. So, Professor Entry, appreciate you for this. And I know
okay, abusia wene ensema ekoso ewo political highway ne so John Dramani Mahama and finally were elected ne cabinet ministers yenso yede eho ensem and the bremon ye beda mase se moje pene kokoti sa audio we e de MI aha POG Media so beda mase